And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our August listening club. I just want to take care of a couple of housekeeping rules before we go ahead and get started on this. I can see that nobody's watching at this time. Sometimes people come in and out, but I'm still going to give the whole spiel of if you are watching us live, you can actually comment on these and we will see those live and we can feature them and respond to you as part of a real conversation. We try to keep our panels small so we don't allow a ton of people in on them just for the sake of my sanity of trying to moderate a bunch of people talking about a subject. But we want to make sure that you are able to join us in that way. And if you're watching it on the replay, you can comment on it and we still get notifications. I still want to talk to you about all of our picks. So let us know. It takes us a little bit longer, to read comments that are left on the replay because we have to actually go online and get the notification for it. But still would love to discuss it with you guys. And if you're not into music albums, we also have a monthly movie club, which we actually had our discussion about Mulholland Drive last night. So that is already up and you can already comment on the replay of that. We also have a quarterly book club. We actually just started our new book this month, so we won't be having the discussion until the end of October, but we're reading Dracula and I am very excited about that. So you still have plenty of time to read it. And if you would like to join the panel for that or for our music or movie picks for next month, just let Beckett or I know. Like I said, we don't have a lot of room on these panels, so get in quick because we only have like 4 seats. If you'd like to join us, we actually have a Facebook group, which I have put on the screen. We are Dragonfly Arts. And we don't just do these multimedia clubs. We also, have weekly calls and feedback calls. It's a group of artists saying, artists helping artists. So we like to talk about creative problems, how like the entertainment industry and all of that. And it's just a good group of people to talk to. If you are interested in what we do, you can find us on there as well as, this multimedia club and all of our past picks. It's also where we announce our next picks. So that is the best way to stay in touch with us. And if you like what we do, you can support us on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Right now, everything that we do is free and open to the public. But I think we do have some perks in the works. Some perks in the works. But for right now, you can just support us on there, and we'd greatly appreciate it. And with that in mind, let's get started on talking about Getz Gilberto.
America's gateway drug to Brazilian music.
It's true. I always ask the same set of questions at the start of all of our conversations, so I'm going to go ahead with our music ones. Have you guys listened to this album before it was selected for Club?
Oddly enough, I have, but not on purpose. My dad listens to this all the time, so he's always got it playing at his house. As soon as it came on, because I didn't recognize the name, and then so when I put it on, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think even when we were talking about it, I was like, it's one of those albums where even if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have heard it.
Yeah, you don't think you've heard it, but you've heard it. Mm-hmm. I have an interesting story about that. I haven't listened to this until since I really got heavily into Brazilian music, which is in 2006 or so. And I was really terrified that I wasn't going to like it because there would be basically, it's 1964, right? And American drummers wouldn't know what to do with bossa or samba in 1964. And I was completely relieved that the drummer, everybody's Brazilian except Stan Getz, right? Which was it was like it was better than I remembered it. And then all this stuff I've learned about Brazilian music over the last couple of decades, this sort of fit into that in a really healthy way. And I was really, really happy. Now, it's an interesting distillation of what kind of, of Brazilian music. There's definitely some things the record label did to make this more palatable to, how do you say, mainstream America. But it's like, it's still legit. Like, it's all written by Brazilians. They even do a couple of the track 2 and 3 are like Brazilian standards, for lack of a better term, like a jazz band doing Rodgers and Hart or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, this is the stuff.
It's actually kind of funny. When I was in college, I was a flute principal for music school, and my flute teacher plays a lot of Brazilian music. Like, she specialized and traveled to Brazil often to play with like bands down there. She really likes it. And I actually distinctly remember Desafinado.
Yeah.
We played like a version of that as part of, weirdly enough, we played it as like a flute choir. So we had one person playing the lead and then like everybody else doing the background for it. And it's almost so different that like I barely recognized it on this album. Everything on this album is just so chill.
Yeah.
And I don't remember it being quite that chill.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, like, it's like, I think that was one of the things the record company did to make it palatable. It's like 100% chill, and real, most Brazilian albums wouldn't be 100% chill. There would be some more up stuff. But it's interesting that in the traditional Brazilian music ensembles, there's a lot more woodwinds than there are brass, right? It's not that they don't have brass, but like flute and clarinet, like, is still a hip thing in Brazil, where, maybe not in all parts of the planet. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of flute. I can't say, but I'm also not well versed in Brazilian music, so
yeah,
that's really my experience with it, was just learning from somebody who did know a lot about Brazilian music. My second question that I always ask is, what's your favorite song from the album?
Oh, geez.
Sorry, you should know that it's coming.
Well, I'm going to say Desafinado, because that's now a standard, and it wasn't when this album came out. And that's kind of cool. Like, a lot of things that are standards, they just sort of like, they seem prehistoric. And I was alive when this album came out, because I'm that old. And so that's kind of cool that, hey, there's a standard that everybody discovered after I was born. So for me, but I mean, there isn't any, like, there's no track on this album where you're just going, they didn't need that one, right? It's just, everything works. And the only thing about Girl from Ipanema is like, well, it's just, the only negative reaction I ever heard from it is, it's just, I heard it too much. Like, it was the only Brazilian song people knew and the only Brazilian song people played. And it was just kind of, okay, there is, there are other things too.
It's in all kinds of media. I am going to be totally honest. This is not my jam. So it was really hard to tell the songs apart. They all sound very similar to me, except for The Girl from Ipanema, because I know that one from, TV and movies and stuff. But
I think that's entirely fair. I usually think that this album is more of a vibe. Mm-hmm. Like, there are some albums that we've talked about that are like almost a coherent story from start to finish. Like, it has ups and downs. This is vibes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things the record label did. Like, for anybody who's interested in this album, I have the ultimate next album for you to buy. And the main difference between this and this next album is it's not completely chill the whole time. It's almost like this is for like background music for a dinner party or date music, right? And this other album, it's called Tom and Ellis, which includes Antonio Carlos Jobim and Ellis Regina as the singer. it's like there's up stuff, there's chill stuff like this, but there's like this range of stuff, and it's much more Brazilian than this, which is kind of a vibe that Americans can kind of deal with in 1964, you know?
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of that time period, and also elevator music.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just going to change the slides randomly throughout it unless I have something that's portraying it. But anyway, here is Stan Getz and João Gilberto and Astrid. And also the bossa nova groove, because I felt like that was very important for this album.
She looks like Amy Winehouse.
Because of the hair?
Rather, I guess Amy Winehouse looks like her.
Did you guys know that this was her first professional gig? I don't think she had, she certainly hadn't recorded before, but I think she was just sort of enlisted for this.
I mean, that makes sense, because also her vocals are like so sporadically used on the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she is on the big hit. You know, yes. One of the interesting things was, I forget, is it Gilberto or Jobim that is the singer, the male singer? Is it
Gilberto is the singer on the entirety of this album, but Jobim is playing bass.
Yeah. Somebody, I read somewhere that he didn't sing with vibrato on this album, whereas he had before. And I think that's part of the vibe of the album. It's kind of like plain, right, in terms of the vocal delivery. That might have been because that's all Astrid could do, right? And he wanted to fit in with that vibe. But and I want to keep going on about this, but that it's definitely a vibe. There's no vibrato in the vocals because it wouldn't fit. It would sort of disrupt the vibe. It would start sounding like, you know, some bravura, you know, vocal performance. And it's just very consistent from track to track. You could like have this on your record player and flip it over, and you just got dinner party music like set for the rest of your life, if you're into that thing.
These are all original songs, right? There's nothing that's like derivative from something else?
Well, there's two standards. So 2 songs that nobody on the album wrote, right? So except for those 2, yeah, they're all original.
I think they were all written by Jobim, though. I don't think that it was written by Stan Getz and Gilberto, except for like maybe like, you know, their lines on it. I thought that most of it was they're original to the album, but not written by Stan Getz and João Gilberto. But I might be wrong on that. So
no, it's I'm looking at the writers, and definitely nothing from Stan Getz, and it's all Jobim.
Okay.
Except for the standards.
Yeah. Okay. So I am. So the bass player wrote the songs.
Well, so he played piano actually.
Did he play piano?
Really interesting. Yeah, he played piano on the album, but it's really, really minimal. Really, really minimal.
I just might be wrong in my
interesting
knowledge.
Story about the bass player, but that's sort of getting off into the weeds.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing any piano. I guess I wasn't listening very closely.
Yeah, he's doing that Count Basie thing where just every once in a while, a couple of notes, you know, a little, you know, half a chord, right? And then just it's like one of the things that also makes it like the vibe is it's a real minimalist. Now, if you're a jazz listener in 1964, this is complete minimalism, right? Even like, you know, to make Miles Davis proud, it's just sort of like there's so little going on, you know, in a certain sense. Not that it's not great songs and stuff, but it's just like it's really minimal.
By the way, you're correct. He is the piano player. I don't know why my brain knowledge said bassist. So
yeah.
But you are correct. He is the pianist.
But you can't really hear the bass too. It's sort of like, and the drummers you can't really hear the drums either. It's just like this thing.
I don't know how you guys listen to this album, but I listened to it with headphones on because I knew that I would kind of drift off elsewhere if I didn't make it like the main thing I was doing. And I'm a little upset that Tim's not here because what really got to me was the panning and the depth of the album, because like when you record, you generally want to make the band feel like they have a place. Like the bass is usually like a little bit farther back in the mix, and then like the drums are panned to either side depending on like what they are. This one felt so like spread out. Like when listening to it with headphones on, I felt like the like bass and the drums were like so far back, and it was just a very narrow room, and every single person was
right now,
just like standing in front of the next one. Did that make any sense?
I didn't listen on headphones. I don't know if I've ever listened on headphones, but does it sound like you're in a room with them or not at all?
It sounds like you're in a room with them, but yeah, my description of it is it feels like it's just a very narrow room where each of them have to stand in front of the next one. Like there is some pretty heavy panning to either side. It got me. I might mute Tim for now.
Yeah, your mic is picking up a bit of feedback, Tim.
Is it? Okay.
It might be his dog too.
Well, no, I can hear
that was
her
the dog,
as well.
for sure.
That was the dog. But that was only because I wasn't speaking then.
Oh, Tim left.
He's already done with us.
He's over it.
Stomped off set. We're gonna get a phone call from his agent in a minute.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't listen to it on headphones. I listened through my sound system, so I didn't really get that feel. But I kind of get what you're saying in that, like the levels and the tracks all feel kind of separate, and it gives it a really like full sound, like you're saying, like you're in a room with them.
There were also some strange things that happened with mixing that I noticed with the headphones on that I meant to go back and like listen to again, just because I was like, did my ears mess something up? But it sounds like things would like switch aside randomly. Like it was like a mistake in like the tape recording. But yeah, that was like the mix for it was really, it doesn't surprise me that you guys said that like you could barely hear piano or bass, because I could barely hear them and I had headphones on because they were just sitting so far back.
I even turned up like my speakers automatically turn on surround mode, and I turned it on to the mode for music listening, and that way I could pick up more of the stuff. On surround, I couldn't hear any of that. It was like basically just the vocals and like the what is it, the little brush hi-hat.
Yeah, the brushes on the drums.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when you say that. I'm looking at the recording that it was a jazz record producer, Creed Taylor, but it was Phil Ramone as a sound engineer, and I don't know what he was doing at the time, but he later became much more famous as sort of a pop music producer as opposed to a jazz producer.
Huh. Yeah, it was very interesting for me to think about the mix, and that was one of the things I thought about that, and I also thought about just how breathy Stan Getz's like playing was through the first half of the album. As he's playing every single time, I'm like, it's very buzzy.
I kind of like it. It gives it an easy feeling. Like I want to sit on a white sand beach and drink a Mai Tai,
But Becca, when you say breathy, do you mean the tone he's getting or the way he's recorded, or both?
It could be either one or both. I don't hear it later on in the album. I heard it through what would probably be side one, like through Destinado.
I guess when I think about when you say breathy, and I think about Getz, at least Getz doing this material, is that you do hear his attack on the reed. You hear you kind of hear the as he's blowing on the reed before you actually hear the tone. So that's probably
and I wonder if it's a mic placement thing that was going on, or if that's just like a part of his like stylistic. Because again, I didn't hear it later on.
It almost sounds like there's like something in the sax is not tightened all the way, so you're getting some air through.
I can't say this for sure. I'm not a saxophone player, but my impression is that he's trying to soften what was his standard attack when he was playing with like Woody Herman. He's trying to soften that attack to fit the mood and the very gentle vocal attack and the nylon string guitar attack. So he's trying not to really overblow. He's being very careful about his tone so that he fits in with the other players.
I've spent a lot of time around like woodwinds being recorded, and it's interesting to me that you would ever hear that in the like regardless, just because of how you record woodwinds. It doesn't seem like a mic placement. So I do still have like questions on why it was heard.
Do you think it's? But I kind of was thinking it was what Tim said, which is like he's really conscious of playing softly, because Gilberto was really critical during the recording of the album of what he was doing. But it was, as I read, it was more about his rhythmic interpretation of stuff and the way he plays rhythms, which is not necessarily the way a Brazilian would do it, kind of like how an American jazz player would do it. You know what I mean? But I wonder if he was getting feedback on. He was just getting feedback and just trying to like play softer and fit in better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's it, because I've played sax before, and if you blow really softly on it, you kind of get a little bit of that air coming through versus like the full sound of the sax. So I think that's probably the ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I ever thought about that before, because it always just kind of felt like it was supposed to be there to me.
Exactly. It's just sort of this classic thing, and then that's the way the sax is supposed to be on this song forever.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Getz play live just shortly before he passed away, and I don't recall him playing like that, on a live date. It was him I think it was him with a trio, or he was with two other. He was either with bass and drums, or he was bass drums and piano. I can't remember. But yeah, his attack was, kind of what he did, traditionally, in the bands that he played and in his solo work outside of the Bossa stuff.
Yeah. But, it's interesting what he lent to this project. I mean, I'm imagining this got recorded because Stan Getz lent his name to it, but he's also letting it be what it is. There's none of his tunes on here, right? I'm sure he's getting a lot of direction because Gilberto really resisted what he was doing, at least on this album. They worked together after this, and they had a much better, working relationship from what I'd read. But, to be Stan Getz, and the guy had a career going at this point, to be taking direction from guys from another country, and he must have really respected what they did. He must have really respected the music, and he's basically lending his name to an album that's going to sell 1 million copies, which is enormous for a jazz record. And he broke Brazilian music open on a sort of like a global level. So on one hand, he's being like sort of real humble, I think, and lending his name to it and not really sort of controlling. I don't know if he was picking the tunes, but he's not his tunes. And, so I think that's interesting. It's definitely not a typical Stan Getz date, even as a sideman.
Well, speaking of the compositions, what I find interesting is that none of João Gilberto's compositions are on there either. And he invented this genre. A lot of people think it was Jobim who had invented it, but no, Jobim actually kind of discovered Gilberto and is responsible for Gilberto having a name outside of Brazil. He kind of helped make Gilberto famous, but I've always found it very frustrating that I feel like Jobim, who's a great writer, he's a serviceable piano player, and he's a great singer, but he always seems to get way more credit than he deserves for this genre. Gilberto was the man who developed this whole style.
Yeah. You know what else I read in the prep for this? That Bossa Nova was only 6 years old. Like the first recording is in 1958. So for a trend from another country, which would have been considered a third world country at that time, to make it to the States in 6 years is pretty dang quick. when you
So I did a little bit of digging around while you guys were discussing that. But Stan Getz actually recorded 2 bossa nova albums on his own before this. He was given an album of Jobim and Gilberto and really, really liked it and ran with it before recording this album and like going to meet them. But also Gilberto at the time like didn't speak English and Getz didn't speak Portuguese, so they did all of their communication through Jobim.
Mm-hmm.
Which also probably led to a lot of their disagreements. And in fact, on Getz Gilberto number 2, they're completely separate. So one side is all Stan Getz and the other side is all João Gilberto.
Yeah.
Which is just a really interesting and fun fact. But yeah, the bossa nova was very, very new and moved quickly. But yeah, I'm not familiar with the 2 albums that Getz did before this, so I can't really compare them.
Was he doing just their tunes or other tunes besides Jobim and Gilberto?
Let's find out. The internet exists.
And he was primarily a jazz musician, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is interesting because I'm completely unaware of the bossa albums that he did prior to this. I mostly know him as part of Woody Herman's group.
Yeah.
I am doing Wikipedia research on this, so my knowledge is coming from what I am reading on Wikipedia right now. And it looks like some of it is covers, nothing by Gilberto, some by Jobim, but some of it is also like standard like American jazz people. Gary McFarland wrote a couple of songs on this.
So treating jazz and doing a bossa
Charlie Lee
arrangement
Bird.
I'd be really curious to hear those albums, to hear what, because we were just discussing it, hear what Getz Attack is like on those songs in the absence of Jobim and Gilberto.
Even cooler on the album Jazz Samba, which came before Big Band Bossa Nova, which came right before this this album. He recorded Desafinado. And I'm curious about listening to the comparison between those two, between his version and the version that's on this album.
Hey, Rebecca, did you see his grandparents are from Kiev in Ukraine?
I did not. Stan Getz?
Escaped the pogroms to Whitechapel in London. Wow.
And then apparently went to Pennsylvania, which makes sense because that's where my family lives.
Yeah. That was his grandparents, though, that were from Ukraine, not his parents. But yeah. Looking at those albums, are there any Brazilians on those albums? Probably not the big band album, but the other album. Are there any Brazilians on there?
No.
Yeah. And Tim, you missed this, but one of the things, the point I made out that made me really love this album even more, or love this album more, was that I hadn't listened to it since I really started deeply studying Brazilian music, like for performing, in the 2000s, right? And I was really terrified I was going to hate it because they would have American drummer and he would be doing 1964 American drummer things. But I was really, really pleased that Stan Getz is the only American on this and everybody else is Brazilian. Therefore, even though it's being homogenized a bit for the American market, it's still Brazilians doing the homogenization as opposed to Americans. Yeah. So I really appreciated that. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to like it. I mean, the whole album.
I mean, I don't know about the division of work on this album because I know Creed Taylor is credited as if on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jobim was an unnamed producer on there. And if you listen to his albums, something like Wave, those albums sound really, really good. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's a great producer in this genre. But if you, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of these songs as Gilberto recorded them. You know, a few years earlier. I have all his early albums or all his early recordings. But if you want to hear a really interesting take on these, there are two albums of Jobim and Frank Sinatra doing these songs, and it's you know, if you don't like Sinatra, you probably won't like the album. But if you like the way Sinatra sings, it's a pretty cool album.
Wow.
Two albums. You can actually get them in one. You can get both albums in one package. I love this album so much. It just, you know, I was very. What year did this album come out, Becca?
64.
1964. All right, so I'm 1 year old when this came out, but Bossa Nova was the background music for the whole mid 60s into the early 70s. I mean, you couldn't get away from it. It was very much the non-rock pop music at the time, and corporate America loved it. They used it in their advertisements. It just there's something about it that just worked for everything. And whenever I mean, it just takes me back to that time when I listened to this album and Gilberto's early recordings and all that stuff. I love it. This is just one of those great kickback albums that you can just close your eyes and just pretend, as Beckett said, you're on a beach somewhere, you know, kicking back.
Oh, you know, Tim, you brought up something that I wanted to bring up. So just to build on that, so you know, I talked about this earlier, sort of the gateway drug for America for Brazilian music, and an album that Jobim did about 10 years later is. So I was first introduced to it when I started to get into Brazilian music a lot 20 years ago. And it's called Ellis and Tom, which is Jobim with Elis Regina, who is an amazing Brazilian singer. And it's kind of like what I would recommend to people if they love this, because that one is 100% Brazilian. This one is American in that it's got a real vibe, and it's not sanitized, but it's sort of like everything's the same. We're not going to freak anybody out. And then the Ellis and Tom album is like much more Brazilian. There's more up stuff. There's more samba. There's drums on it as opposed to just brushes and pandeiro, right? And it's really delightful. But anyway, the story about that album was that every household in Brazil has Ellis and Tom. Everybody's got it. Kind of like if you have a Brazilian album in the 60s and 70s, it would be this. So.
Interestingly, the two of them had a very rocky relationship in the recording studio. And last year, I think it was, a documentary was released about them getting together in the studio to record that material. I think it's called Ellis and Tom.
Oh, you're talking about the Ellis and Tom album?
I'm talking about the documentary that came out last year about the recording of that album.
You know, I saw something. Yeah, 2022. Yeah, that's really interesting. She had always wanted to record with him. That was like apparently like this big life goal of hers, and it took a long, long time. And she died really young.
Apparently they did not get along real well to start out, and I guess this documentary shows how that relationship goes. And you listen what comes out in the, you know, what came out in the recordings. It's just absolutely stunning. Yeah, it's a fabulous album, and she's a wonderful singer.
Yeah, as opposed to, I mean, Astrid Gilberto, you know, this is her first big gig. She's a very, how do you say, very stylized. I do this thing, and that's all we're going to do on this album. I don't know how she developed as a singer, because honestly, I don't know of any other music she did that sounded different than this album. But yeah, Elis Regina can definitely does a whole lot more vocally on that Ellis and Tom album. But anyway, I just love the idea that every house.
Astrid's style is very. She doesn't She doesn't experiment. She doesn't try to impress you. She just sings the song, and she's part of what sets that mood that Getz is trying to play to, I think, because her vocal is very understated.
Yeah, and I bet she's not a loud singer either. If you listen to her tone, you can't make that tone if you're like trying to project or sing something forte or fortissimo. That's a real quiet.
Yeah,
real quiet
she passed away earlier this year, but I don't think she had recorded it. I don't think she had recorded anything since the 70s. But there's one of those greatest hits albums out there, and a lot of stuff, and it all sounds like Astrid. She doesn't, she doesn't try to impress you. She just sings the song.
Yeah, and that's part of the appeal of this album, right? It's just real straightforward vocal delivery. No
I think so.
Just a vibe.
I think so. I think the way everybody melds in this album, it's almost like they're all speaking in one voice. Nobody jumps out at you. It's all very, very give and take between, the people who are playing.
I did also want to talk about just the girl from Ipanema, because it's the most famous part of this album. I kind of always forget that the first half of it is in Portuguese from Gilberto's point of view, and then it switches to Astrid.
Yeah, because whenever you hear it used in media, it's always just her vocals.
And I didn't do this for all of the songs. I don't speak Portuguese, but I was like, what is the difference in lyrics? Like, what were the original lyrics versus what was then written later for her to sing in English from it? And I don't know. I always think it's weird that it's about an actual person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about the background of the song, so.
The background of the song is that they watched the same girl walk past a cafe and thought that she was pretty. Like, actually.
There you have it. That's how you tell a story in Bossa Nova.
But the Portuguese lyrics are so much sadder because they're from his point of view. So it's him watching this like really pretty girl pass by constantly and then just being like, but I am alone and so sad.
Yeah.
I like the lines, this beauty that exists, this beauty that is not only mine, that also passes by alone. Why am I so alone? Why is there so much sadness? Sounds so much better in Portuguese.
De Moraes was a very thoughtful lyric writer. He didn't just throw shit together. And Norman Gimbel wrote TV jingles. So, that's the difference between the two.
Oh, so what? One did the Portuguese, one did the English?
Yeah.
De Moraes. I didn't get that.
Yeah, De Moraes wrote the original Portuguese lyrics, and Norman Gimbel did his bastardization lyrics.
Yeah, I would highly suggest looking up the translation of it, just because like there's such a difference in like the tonality of it between like this weird thing about a guy being lonely and then seeing beauty pass by, but the beauty is also alone, and so is like what is the beauty of it? Is he also like, if this beautiful person is also alone, what does that mean about his loneliness? And then, every time she passes by, everybody goes, ah.
And that's the actual girl, her right there?
Yeah. Well, when she's older, she was like 16.
I was reading what's on screen. It says she was 17 at the time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's a real. Oh, I thought when you said it's about a person, you mean the song's about a person. It's about an actual person that they know.
About a real person that walked by a cafe every day on her way to work.
To give you a sense of the two different songwriters, De Moraes is a hero in Brazil, one of the great known as one of the great, songwriters of the country. And Norman Gimbel, nobody knows who he is unless you're in TV or entertainment.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
Well, I wonder if it was just a matter
He
of
co-wrote
being-
"Killing Me Softly" with his song.
Interesting.
Even a stopped clock has to be right twice a day.
How did we get onto "Killing Me Softly"?
That's
lost.
something else that Norman Gimbel wrote. He co-wrote it.
With Roberta Flack? Or did Roberta Flack not even write that?
Charles Fox with Norman Gimbel.
That's who was his partner in television writing. They both did all those TV themes. I think they did the Brady Bunch theme, as a matter of fact.
Well, there you go.
Well, I'm also fascinated by this cover. What art piece is this?
Oh, you know what? That's on the wiki page. It's an artist. It's Puerto Rican artist, and I'm gonna mangle the name. Olga Albizu, Albizu, and she did some of the other Stan Getz album covers. that
Yeah,
were
I was about to
boxes.
say I notice it from it.
Hmm.
A fun
it-
thing is this
Oh, go ahead.
album cover messes with me because a lot of my computer is in dark mode, and so it just like, unlike on here where it's like a pure black leading into like an off black, on my actual computer when I tried to pull it up, they're the same color of black, and it really just screwed with my head. That's just a fun aside. But yeah, I did notice that like Stan Getz uses this exact style on a
So
lot of his.
is she like a commissioned artist that he uses for a lot of his album artwork?
Or the record label did.
It's interesting. 'Cause I
Can I
think
just- Oh, I'm sorry.
this is such a gorgeous cover, and the next Getz Gilberto album is so ghastly. Whoever did the design on the next album, it's not the artwork, it's how the color composition of the design is just absolutely horrifying compared to this.
Well, now I have to look it up.
Yeah,
Well,
same.
there's something interesting, and this is on the Getz Gilberto wiki page, but she's described as an abstract expressionist plastic artist. So I'm not sure what that means. Is this plastic we're looking at?
No, plastic is like sculpture.
Okay.
Non
Yeah,
generally,
it's-
generally
probably
speaking,
different.
non-painting visual arts.
She probably works in different mediums.
Yeah,
So this is a painting. This isn't plastic work,
this is
right?
a painting.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I was just trying to, yeah. It is very nice.
Yeah, she really only did these things for Stan Getz. Like, so it must have been through him that she knew, because she did a bunch of his albums and then Trio 64 by Bill Evans.
Hmm.
So, which oops, I think he's even listed on her page as her patron. So this went through Stan Getz. But it's interesting because the Bill Evans was also produced by Creed Taylor. So maybe that was actually the connection there.
Was it the
Verb
same
was-
label?
Verve was his label.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same label. So, I mean, a lot of
Same
those
label.
folks were sort of working for the label.
Verve was Creed. Creed was the head of Verve at the time,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
So there's a art critic talking about this woman's work, and she compared it to Kandinsky, which I'm familiar with, but a person named Hans Hofmann. Is anybody familiar with Hans Hofmann?
Not yet, but I'm about to be. Okay, yeah, I could see the similarities.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very, very color block, abstract work.
Mm-hmm. Hans Hofmann. Well, there you
Oh
go.
yeah, he's a little more blocky.
Yeah, he's a lot more blocky. There's something familiar about his work, but that could be said about a lot of people's works,
Especially in this like
especially
abstract style.
abstract art.
Yeah. I can't find the album that you're talking about, Tim.
Yeah,
Just
same.
go to the Getz Gilberto album page and then look at the top under the album, and it'll have the next album there.
Yeah, but
called
that one's still by Olga Albazu.
Yeah.
And I think it would look a lot better if it just was on a black background instead of a white background.
I agree 100%.
So
Oh,
it doesn't
Getz
strike
Gilberto
me as
number 2?
being particularly bad, just it could be better.
Yeah, and I don't think that was her choice. I think whoever did the graphic design on the album, I think she just probably did the painting. You know, the Trio 64 album is a little bit better because the blue blends a little better with the white background, but it's still not as gorgeous as this cover is.
It just goes to
the
show
white-
that the mat you choose to present your work on matters.
Yeah, the white really doesn't do it any favors.
All right.
Presentation is important.
So does
So-
anybody have a favorite tune?
Oh, we talked about that before you got on, so it's up to you to tell us what yours is.
Oh, probably it'll be either Corcovado or Desafinato. Probably Corcovado.
That's fair. Miguel's was Desafinato.
Yeah, you know, you ask me tomorrow and I'll probably say Desafinato, and then ask me the next day, I'll say Corcovado again.
Desposito. I had mentioned it was really hard for me to separate the tunes, so I couldn't tell you a favorite song or not.
I think the only reason that I can is because I know these songs so well, and I've heard them sung by, like by Sinatra and by Gilberto and by his wife at the time. So I know those melodies really, and I played a lot of these tunes, so I know all these melodies well. Otherwise, I'd be where you are. It would all, because of the mood of this album and how consistent it is all the way through. I think we talked about this on another album where we were talking about. I think we were talking about something where all the songs just kind of sounded the same, and it was hard to tell the songs apart. And this is kind of like that, but these are all great fucking songs.
Yeah, I think the other album where we had a difficulty telling the songs apart was weirdly Pink Floyd.
Yeah,
because they are all just like.
But it was
supposed
also
to be
there. It wasn't
aligned.
a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing on this album either. I just
On that album, that's kind of the point. It's kind of like one long through, album.
We were talking about, David Lynch last night for our movie club and how he's more of like a vibe. Like you watch his movies as a vibe. Like there are movies that you watch for the plot and movies that you watch for the feel. And when books happen, there are some books that don't even have plots. They're just vibes. This album is a vibe.
Yes.
In a good way.
I mean, I think in the case of David Lynch, a lot of people can't even grab onto anything but a vibe. So that's what his movies have become about. Depending on the movie, there's probably more there, but I just think that most people kind of leave a Lynch film scratching their heads.
Yeah, I think not to go off into movie, but I do think that I don't have much more to add on this album. But I think Derek finally hit the nail on the head for why I'm not a fan of David Lynch, which is, you have to watch his movies as an emotion, and I like logic a lot more. So,
yeah, go watch the David Lynch talk from last night.
Hey, I wanted to mention something about the drummer on this album, just because he's got a ridiculous name and he felt forced to change his name from his Brazilian name. So his stage name is Milton Banana.
Yeah.
And hopefully he pronounced banana a little different, banana or something. But his real name was Antonio de Souza, and he was a Brazilian. But I just think it's like, oh my God, to feel like in order to get gigs, you had to change your name to Milton Banana from
I did see that, and I'm so happy that you brought it up.
Antonio de Souza.
I like
Antonio de Souza is such a
better.
great name.
Yeah, like why? I don't understand.
Well, so he could get work, right? And he also had a trio named Milton Banana.
Yeah. Are you going to remember somebody named Antonio de Souza? Or are
I
you
would.
going to remember somebody whose name is Milton
then-
Banana?
Again,
I
take yourself back to the pre-Nixon days of the mid-'60s. I mean, come on.
That's fair. Yeah.
And Antonio Carlos Jobim, you know.
Yeah, well, he's older. I think he's older than Jobim. He was born in 35. Maybe he's not older than Jobim. But I don't know. It's just so weird.
Well, you're definitely not forgetting a name like Milton Banana.
Yeah, and it might be a Carmen Miranda thing because she always had that hat with the bananas in it, right? Speaking of the only Brazilian any American in 1964 would know. But yeah, I just like, dude, I want to give him his name back. His name is Antonio de Souza.
I was just looking at it. I was just looking at his credits, and Mr. Banana played on those early recordings by Gilberto. So I have a lot of his work.
Yeah.
Oh, you
that's
know what? I'm
unfortunate.
looking at his discography. Why does it not have? It's only his stuff as a
leader,
only
I
his
think.
stuff as a leader. Oh, you're talking about? Yeah, there's that one early João album.
No, two of them. One on Odeon and one on Polydor.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's João Donato.
Donato.
Yeah.
Gilberto, my mistake.
And his trio.
There you go. Cool.
Bonato, not banana.
Wait. How do you say it?
I don't know.
No. His name is Milton Banana, but João Donato.
I just wanted to give the guy some love. It's just like, okay.
I appreciate that you did because I didn't even like click on his name. I was like, Milton Banana, okay. and then I moved on.
Wow. Where do you get
Antonio
Milton
Carlos
from?
Jobim. Antonio Carlos Jobim and João Gilberto and Jobim. Let's see who else can we,
Who else can we
I
name?
always struggle when I try to pronounce these names because it turns out that if I don't know how to pronounce something correctly, I gain a Russian accent. Which really amused my old roommate who was studying to be like
We
a
have
vet
got
tech.
7 minutes left, and I want to spend 7 minutes on that. That's my entertainment right now.
So like I have to like think about it really, really hard when I'm like pronouncing the names, but like I start to like roll my R's in like a very specific way. And like it's just like a weird thing that I notice and like I have to backtrack on a lot. And so then I just end up mispronouncing their like names in an entirely different way.
I wind up doing that a lot, and my go-to is a Spanish accent. When I was first learning French, I would just kind of pronounce. I would read it and I would pronounce whatever it was with a kind of a Spanish kind of sound. And
so you do speak Portuguese?
No, I do not speak Portuguese.
It's actually a really different sound. Just because you can speak Spanish doesn't mean you can do Portuguese.
Oh no, yeah.
No, I know that. I'm just saying. I'm saying like Rebecca said that, when she comes upon a word she doesn't know, she has it with a Russian accent. I come upon ones that I don't know and I do a Spanish accent or a horribly racist Indian accent.
Yeah, and the joke is
once again, Tim, that's what we need for the next 5 minutes.
Portuguese sounds like American. French.
What were you saying, Beckett?
She's explaining my joke, but we all sound like robots from your computer.
Yeah.
You're blaming Tim?
Is that me?
Yes, I think.
Is that how I sound right
hackers
now?
from India that heard what you just said about your Indian accent, and they're after you, pal.
I don't know what happened.
It's 8 in the morning in India. They're checking you out.
The sound got weird, and now I don't know.
Yeah, whose fault is it?
StreamYards. I don't know.
On that note, I think I will end the stream for the night. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add?
I don't know if it's relevant, but one of my top 3 musical experiences in my life was from Brazil, but I don't think I can compete with the.
That's you.
Is it me?
If
I
we're
don't know
all
who it
hearing
is.
it, then
Tim,
it's
Tim
StreamYards.
froze. It's Tim. He
Or
did
maybe
freeze.
he's just, I don't think he
Oh, no, he
froze.
didn't
I think he's just pointing.
Well, anyway, we should probably get off the air with this kind of sound.
Usually we have the technical problems at the start, but it's a good reason to end. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I hope
Thank
you
you,
have a
Rebecca.
wonderful evening.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.